Welcome to the Growing Up Bananas podcast, where we dissect the perks and tribulations of being bananas.
It's hard being brown when I feel so white.
Before we get started, this episode is brought to you thanks to Ronin Grooming. If you're looking for a fresh cut and some quality chats, hit up Richard at Ronin Grooming, located at Wills Gym, McGregor, and give him a follow at roningrooming.au on Instagram. Let's get into it. My name is Ethan. Raga is sitting across from me, and in many ways, I'm sitting across from him. Very fortunate today to be joined by Raga, or Raga Puppy, on Instagram, if you guys want to check him out. Apart from being a great guy, Raga is a traveller, a football lover, an athlete, an appreciator of the finer things in life. A man of obvious style, but most importantly, if you get sick, he will heal you. Welcome, Raga.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Thanks for having me.
So, Raga, this is Growing Up Bananas. I suppose, would you consider yourself more of a coconut than a banana?
I'd like to think that I'm not a coconut in the sense that I'm a little bit more in touch with my culture, but I think there's certainly lots of similarities between people from Asian country, like Asian backgrounds and Indian backgrounds. I guess India is part of Asia, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
We both face similar sort of challenges growing up in countries like Australia. So this is definitely a very interesting thing for us to talk about.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining me today. I guess let's start at the beginning. So can you take me through your cultural heritage?
Yeah, so I come from the south of India, from a state called Tamil Nadu. So I was born in a city called Chennai, and I was there for the first 4 years of my life before my family moved to Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably don't remember too much of Chennai, so you were 4 when you guys left.
That's right.
What was your childhood like then? So you moved to Singapore at the age of 4, siblings, you guys are a close family?
So I'm actually an only child, so I don't have any siblings. It's just me and my mum and dad. So I actually didn't really speak much English when I moved to Singapore.
Okay.
So it was like a big change for me. Like you said, I don't remember much of India, but then went to Singapore for like the early, kindergarten, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Learned how to speak English there, and like it was a good sort of experience for me. Yeah.
Do you know why your family immigrated to Singapore?
Yeah, so my father is a very hardworking, like resourceful kind of person. He's always sort of looking for like the next thing to do to sort of, try and make life a bit better and easier for us and for me. So I think his primary goal was probably to make a good education for me and a good life for me, essentially.
Okay. Have you ever spoken to them about the actual move? Was it easy to get out of India and go to a place like Singapore?
I have spoken to them about it. I believe it was quite challenging for my family. Yep. My father actually had to move there like almost maybe 6 to 12 months beforehand. So he went there first and he was living there by himself and working while my mum and me were in India. And then they had to get like visa and things like that and get me across.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of a family, so a larger family, were you guys surrounded by any cousins, that sort of thing in Singapore?
So all my, apart from my immediate family, all my extended family actually live in India.
Yeah.
So grandparents, cousins, everyone. So it was like a solo move kind of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been a massive leap for your parents to get out of that comfort zone, I can imagine. And then what's it like then? So I'm assuming you've gone back and, you've seen the family along the way. What's it like when you do go back and see them?
Going back to India is really, really lovely, especially when, I used to live in Singapore. It was very close. So it's only like 3.5 hours away. So it was very accessible and it was easy to go back. And before COVID, I used to go back every single year because I like to go and see my grandparents, getting older and everything. So it's really lovely to go back and spend time with them and just sort of remind yourself where you come from and where your parents have been and things like that. Yeah. Otherwise, it's easy to get a bit lost.
Yeah, well, especially, I don't know if we've sort of spoken about it, but for us, leaving from South Africa, we had a large family.
That's right. Yeah.
And for my parents, we speak about it all the time, having to get themselves and us out of that sort of family, I suppose, safety net.
Yeah.
It was a massive risk,
Yeah.
but your parents do what they have to do to
Exactly right.
for yourself and your future. So we all appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming back in India, the family is quite large, very similar to most sort of Chinese families.
That's right. Yeah. My family's probably not as big as some other families. My father has like one brother. My mum has one brother and one sister. So I've got like, maybe 4 or 5 immediate cousins. But then there's lots of extended family, and my grandparents have lots of siblings, and we're quite close to all of them as well. So I treat them as my grandparents too. So their children and their grandchildren are like essentially, even though they're second and third cousins, it feels like they're a lot closer than that. Especially for me being an only child as well. Like I see everyone like my brother and sister, if you know what I mean, because I don't have that relationship.
On the only child subject, have you any regrets? I know it is as it is, but do you have any regrets that you think, I wish I had that family to grow up around?
The thing is, I can only regret it if I know what it's like to have a sibling. So because I haven't been in that situation, because I don't know what it would have been like, right? So I don't necessarily regret it. I'm kind of happy with how things are at the moment. I feel like I've replaced that missing aspect in my life with other things, such as like good friends and treating my cousins like a lot closer than I normally would, like things like that. Yeah.
Cool, man. Now, so then let's focus a little bit on your time in Singapore. So I know that most of the population there is either Chinese or Malay, with Indians making up a decent portion as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
How did you fit in? So let's talk sort of school time.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any sort of divide racially? I know, speaking to some Singaporeans, it's sometimes more religious or financially. What was your experience going through school there?
So initially, growing up in Singapore, I went to like a public government school. So like you said, it was a mixture of, Chinese, Malay and Indian people there. Singapore is actually like very, very, like you said, multicultural and diverse. And most of the people there are extremely friendly and accepting and welcoming. Growing up, I remember when I was young, I had like lots and lots of Chinese friends, a few Malay friends. Like it was very multicultural. I think growing up, it was very easy. When you're young, you're 6 or 7 years old, you're just playing games and
you don't
really see that very much. Perhaps my family might have had some difficulties, I guess, because like you said, there's an Indian population there, but they've been living there for a long time. And, people coming straight from India, there's still a lot of cultural difference, not cultural, but like there's lots of differences in the way people from India who come to Singapore do things and the people in Singapore who've been there for a long time. So, yeah, we also have a little bit of difficulty there as well.
Yeah. And then in school, so how did you find the experience? You're obviously a very intelligent man. Were you always quite a good student?
I don't think I was always a very good student. I used to actually, back in Singapore, I used to get into trouble a lot for a lot of different things growing up. Not listening in class or disrupting other people, or like, showing up late or causing trouble on the playground. Lots and lots of issues. I remember my parents used to have to come to school so many times. They'd call my parents in, not just for the parent-teacher meetings, outside of the parent-teacher meetings to discuss my behavior with them. So I had a bit of a rocky time. Like I was very naughty.
And then what sort of changed? When did that penny drop?
I think that dropped a little bit late, like actually probably closer to the end of high school. Like I wasn't always like super studious, and then something all of a sudden like clicked inside me. I was like, oh God, like I need to sort of really put my head down, otherwise this is just gonna, because I think I knew that if I studied hard, if I worked hard, I'll do well.
Yep.
But I think I was just not doing that.
And how were your parents in terms of, I don't want to say pressure, but in terms of guiding you along the way?
Yeah.
Were they quite how can I say, was that quite important for them that you did
Well,
achieve your potential?
I think for any parent, like they want their kids to achieve their potential, right, Ethan? But like I was quite fortunate in the sense that my parents never really, like, you'll be surprised to hear this, but like my parents never really told me like you should study this or you should become this or anything like that. I think all they did was generally create like a conducive environment for me to study hard and set me up well. And they didn't really get too involved in like making sure I was studying and things like that. They just sort of let me, I think they had a bit of trust and belief in the process as well. And they set everything up for me and then they just hoped for the best, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's worked out pretty well. And like you said, you've gone on the right path, but you've pulled things together. I guess the last thing on school then, what was, I suppose, the overall experience? You said there's a lot of diversity. Were there any instances or any things where you saw an example of a divide at school?
Not particularly, but generally speaking, it's always going to be like, when a country's majority of a particular cultural group, like there's obviously going to be an element of, I don't want to call it domination, but there's going to be a sense of divide there, right? And then as much as you try to, pander to the needs of the minority, at the end of the day, you do have to respect and acknowledge that there is a majority there. So I think at that point I was too young to see the divide, but I think I have heard of my parents talking about difficulties in their workplace, being from India and working in for example, like a Chinese dominant company and things like that, perhaps rising up the ranks in their companies and things like that was a bit hard for them from what I can hear. But I personally was too young to feel any of those pressures. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And what kind of a kid were you? So I know you love your football, you love your travel now. What sort of a guy were you around that age? I was like still pretty much the same guy. Like I was still playing soccer, still hanging out with my friends. I was perhaps a little bit more like naughty at school and things like that. But at home, I think I was pretty easy to manage. I didn't cause my parents too much trouble at home. Yeah. And then all of a sudden when I stepped out, I just became like a different animal. But yeah, like it wasn't hard for my parents at home, but then they had lots of trouble in the early years of my schooling and things like that. Yeah, you said at the start that you're quite more, so not as much of a coconut as I suppose others are. Yeah. Was your family quite traditional in terms of the culture and trying to hold on to, the Indian side? Yes, I think so. I think my family is very traditional. And I think it also helps that I grew up in Singapore as well, which, as you know, already has a significant Indian majority. I feel like I would have turned out a lot different if my family moved to Australia first rather than Singapore and then Australia. So I've still managed to hold on to a lot of those like cultural values and beliefs for a lot longer because I only moved here when I was maybe 15 or 16. So all those were already formed and then do you know what I mean? Yeah. So what sort of things, I know there's going to be too many to actually name, but can you give us a couple of examples of a really sort of traditional Indian type arrangement? So whether it's holidays or things like that. I know for us in the Chinese culture, it's Chinese New Year, it's those sorts of things. Is it? Because I really know little about the Indian culture, to be honest. Trust me, there's lots of similarities because like I've grown in a country with both Chinese and Indian cultures. Yeah. But I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So in our culture, like rather than us and the family and the members of the family getting importance and things like that, we always prioritize the happiness and the needs of other people, whether it be like your neighbors or your extended family or your like something like that, which is a good thing, by the way, to some extent. But let me give you a small example. All my holidays growing up, like going back to, so I've started traveling now on my own, but when I was growing up, like going back to India for holidays, I remember being very, very frustrated because like it wasn't really a holiday. I was just hopping from like one house to another to sort of meet every single relative. And otherwise, like someone's gonna be like, oh, he came and then he didn't visit us, and they'll get upset, and then
Yes.
you have to deal with all that. So it was, my holidays involved hopping from one house to another and visiting lots and lots of temples. Like that was my holiday.
Yeah.
So that's one example. And then another example is like, we I think you guys do too. Like, you know how you look at feng shui and things like that.
Yeah,
So we
luck
also
and
luck,
things like that. Yeah.
things like that, astrology things. It's a strong belief in Indian culture. So like they look at like planetary positions when you were born, and then apparently that influences your life and things like that. So whenever you do like certain auspicious things, like let's say you opening up a business or building a new house and doing a housewarming ceremony, you have to check like the planetary alignments and
Yep.
the appropriate dates and the times to do these things.
The numbers have to be
The
right
numbers,
as
things like, yeah.
well. Why do you think that is? So we discussed on an earlier episode why we believe Chinese love that, and then also why it then feeds into gambling, because Asians love gambling.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think that the Indians are so
Yeah.
fixated on that?
I think the Indian culture as well as the Chinese culture, they're both probably one of the oldest cultures in the world. Very, very rich in cultural heritage. And obviously these guys have done a lot of things right for like thousands and thousands of years. And clearly like their beliefs and whatever they've done, it has helped them. You know, there's some very, very strong, you know, Chinese dynasties who've been way ahead of their time back in the day. Same with Indian kings who, you know, explored multiple different regions, did business, had good civilizations. Like they were way ahead of their time compared to anyone like around. So like clearly their strong values, beliefs, whichever force or energy they believed in, it helped them achieve these things.
Okay.
So I think you and I, like we sort of have to look at that and like respect that for what it is, and then like form our opinion of that, and then try to see how it fits into our lives, which is obviously hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I 100% agree with you. You know, even I don't want to talk much about religion because this isn't a religious
this isn't
podcast,
it, yeah.
but in saying that, you look at Catholicism, it's only really been around for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at some of the other religions, they triple, quadruple that.
Yeah.
And then even yourself as a medical professional, some of the Western medicine versus the traditional Eastern medicine.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
That stuff's been around for thousands of years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, it might not agree with the science, but it's there and it worked. It worked.
It's clearly helped people in the past and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. My last thing then on family. So with the sort of Chinese or the Asian families, everything revolves around food. So it's so when we used to go on holidays back to South Africa, or even if we go to China, it's literally everything is just around, all right, what's this meal? How do we then fit that into, visiting someone or something like that?
Yeah.
It's all around food. Is your experience quite similar when you go to India?
Yeah, 100%. Food is, like as you said, a big part of the culture. Maybe a little less so than you guys, because I know you guys are like super into your food.
People can be obsessed.
Yeah, and I really personally, because growing up in Singapore, I absolutely love Chinese food, Malaysian food. I sometimes I like it more than Indian food.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, going on holidays is always about eating with your family, going out to restaurants, but also like cooking at home, and there'll be like 20 people there. And so it's definitely a big part of the culture. It's a big part of like bonding with people and spending time and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know for me, like the smells, and then again, just like having a lot of people around, those are some of the fondest memories I've had.
Exactly right.
Of growing up. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Exactly right, especially during like, festival times, like for maybe Chinese New Year for you, Diwali for me, and then we have like certain South Indian specific festivals that we celebrate as well. Like there's one called Pongal, and then we have our own New Year, like Tamil New Year. So like there's lots and lots of opportunities to eat and spend time with your family. Yeah.
I said before I didn't want to talk too much about religion, but just on your Instagram, I know you go to temple, and
that's right. Yeah.
How much of a part does that play in yourself?
Yeah. I would say, like, I grew up, in an environment where, like, I was going to temples a lot, and so all of those practices are quite like enriched in me.
Yep.
For me, I think religion / I'd like to think I'm more of a spiritual person rather than a religious person.
Yeah.
For me, I just sort of believe in like a higher form of energy, a higher power that's sort of just like watching over all of us and guiding us. And in times of like stress or dire times, things like that, I just sort of believing in a higher force just helps me take that burden and pressure off myself. It's not really escapism. Like I still have to do what I need to do to get out of that situation.
Yep.
But I just be like, I just hope everything works out. And then you take that stress off you and hand it to someone higher up, and then things usually work out. That's just how I've seen it.
Yeah. It's a pretty gross generalization, but a lot of sort of Christian people around our age, so 20s to 30s, sort of drop off after they leave home. And I noticed in some of the more Eastern religious groups, they don't, such as yourself. Is that because, like you say, it gives you that grounding, it gives you that something to turn back to? Or is it because it's just something that traditionally the family, it's a no-no, I have to continue?
I don't think it could also be family in some situations, but perhaps like, for example, you know how you mentioned I go to the temples and things like that. So like it's also like kind of like an activity to go to the temple. Like you go to the temple, you might go with your friends, you know, you pray and then there's like food there, so you have a bite to eat.
Yeah, okay.
Like it's also like, you know, I don't want to say it's recreational, but like it's also like a social thing.
It's inviting you in rather than it's like a solemn event where everyone's kind of
exactly
it's more of a
right.
community.
Exactly right.
I'm just putting words in your mouth. Sorry, but
no, but you're right though. Like I feel like the line in India, for me anyway, like I feel like the lines between culture and religion are very blurred.
Yeah.
So like if it's a lot of the things that you do are part of your culture, but then also they end up being religious in some ways. So if you're someone who is rooted to your culture and enriched in your culture, naturally these things it's going to be hard to pull out of that person.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, I see my religion, Hinduism, as more of like a way of life, a more spiritual thing rather than a religion where like, you have to do this, you don't do this, you die. I mean, every religion, if you look at the concepts, they're all very, very similar. Like they talk about the same things. They essentially tell you to be a nice person.
Yes.
So if you can do that, I think it doesn't matter what religion you think you support or anything. Like as long as you're a reasonable human being, that's all.
I 100% agree with that. It's like I said before, it's that moral compass. It's something to go back to. Like you say, they're all very similar.
Yeah.
Don't kill other people.
Literally.
All those lovely things. But yeah, it's just how you, I suppose, how you can interpret it. And I really like the point that you said before where, you go, and I'm not saying that you go to socialize, but if all your friends are
exactly.
there too, then it's going to make you want to stick it out for longer.
Exactly
and
right.
And then you're also going to get, the spiritual side of it. So I love
bonus.
that idea. Maybe some other churches need to look at that. So that sort of model. Let's bounce forwards then. So Australia, you said you came here when you were sort of 15, 16. So you hadn't finished school yet in Singapore. What made that, or what spurred that move?
So that's more from my family side once again. So
was it always a goal to come to Australia?
I think not for my family. No, I think there was one point when they were in Singapore, they had plans to move back to India.
Yep.
So that's why preemptively they actually moved me from a Singaporean public school to a Indian school, like an Indian international school in Singapore, which followed the Indian curriculum. So like they were sort of gearing up for me to go back to India essentially.
How do you think you would have fared? Sorry to break your train of thought,
no, it's okay.
How do you think you would have fared? So you've basically grown up as a Singaporean with a lot of cultural Indian input. How would you have gone if you went back to India?
I think going from Singapore to India wouldn't have been that bad.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been that hard. But for someone to go from India growing up in Australia is a lot harder, I would say. Yeah.
So as you said, you're less of a coconut than many others. And sorry, carry on. So
that's right. Yeah.
So you're gearing up to go back to India. Family things brought you to Australia. So what grade did you start in?
I actually came in grade 9.
Okay.
But then I'd already done like most of grade 9 in Singapore as well.
Yeah.
But then because of the way the months, like, there the term goes from, it doesn't go from January to November. It goes from like the middle of the year to something else.
Yep.
So like I actually had to repeat like part of grade 9 again.
Okay.
So I'm actually like a year older than like everyone in my high school grade.
Yeah.
So I came here in grade 9, and I came to like a massive like Brisbane State High, like
Oh, you went to State
school.
High,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So
One of the best schools in Australia, I believe.
yeah, it's a great school. But initially, yeah, it was hard. Like, like I spoke differently, dressed differently.
Yep.
And 15, 16 is that odd age, where you're trying to fit in a group and trying to make friends, but then there's already pre-established friendship groups. And
Everyone knows each other.
From
from
grade
preschool
8
even,
or something, or they went to primary school together or something. Yeah, so it was hard. But then the thing that got me in was soccer. So
Yes.
like the fact that I played soccer, I just automatically made so many friends, and it was very easy after that.
Yeah. And how did you find the academic side of it? Was it easy to, again, I don't want to keep harping that you're a very intelligent man, but was it easy to make that transition from a Singapore school to an Australian curriculum?
I think, yeah, because of the standards in Singapore being extremely high, and also in India, so like the Indian syllabus and the Singaporean syllabus is like absolutely nuts. So initially, that definitely made it a bit easier for me to transition. I'm not saying our syllabus isn't hard. It's definitely challenging as well, but it just made that transition a bit easier because of like coming from a very high level beforehand. Yeah.
And then, so grade 9, 10, 11, like you said, you managed to find a few circles in soccer and things like that. Culturally, did you associate with mainly Asians, or how was that? How was that move?
I think in school, like I'm sure you've seen this. There's always like like a brown group, a Chinese, like Asian group, and then like a bunch of rugby guys, and then like it's always like that. So I think in school, my group was mainly a bunch of Indian, Sri Lankan, and like Bangladeshi boys.
Yeah.
So we all played a bit of soccer, and we had similar interests, and we've hung out most of the time. And of course, we had friends from like other backgrounds as well, but like that was the main group. Yeah.
And then what were your expectations before coming to Australia? So you would have, I don't know what you would have known about Australia coming there. Again, on a previous episode, Marcus, who was from Singapore, who you've met through soccer.
That's right.
He was saying that all his friends who had never actually been to Australia were saying, everyone there's racist, you're going to struggle, no one's going to want to talk to you. What were your expectations?
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember, but around those times, like 2010, 2011, there was actually lots of issues. Like it was very, very publicized on the news, like racist attacks and people getting, attacked on the streets and things like that. So when my family like decided to move to Australia, like everyone back home in India were really, really worried. Right. They were like, because the media always...
And you're only going to see what they tell you, right?
Exactly right. So like Australia is an amazing place. It's extremely tolerant. You can do anything you want within limits, of course. But like it's a great place to be. But then the moment, one thing happens, it's just blown up out of proportion on the news. Like, I don't know, like Indian students getting attacked and things like that. Of course, it's really terrible that happened to that one individual. But it's not a marker of what's going to happen if you move to Australia. So it was initially really bit of negative press around that. So, and then we sort of had to still come despite that and then figure out that, actually it's not too bad here. Yeah.
And any reason why Brisbane?
So
family?
It was all my family. So like I had no role to play in it. The two main reasons my family moved was one, when you turn 18 in Singapore, you have to do compulsory military service for 2 years. Which looking back, like I wish I did that. Like it would have been so cool to do that.
Yeah.
But clearly coming from an Indian or an Asian background comes in. Like they have a clear focus on education. So they don't necessarily want to spend 2 years taking away from their education. That's probably one of the reasons, which links into why like my family moved here as well because they wanted to give me like a good, because they know that university education is really good here. Singapore is extremely competitive. Being a small country, there's only a few government universities. Getting into courses is way more competitive.
Yep.
So that's probably one of the reasons they moved as well.
So when it comes to Australia and discrimination, a lot of the people I'm speaking to is it's not necessarily someone getting verbally or physically abused. It's more the actions, the body language that sometimes, you might be oversensitive at times, but sometimes that's what is more alarming than actually someone, calling you a Chinese guy or whatever. Things like, if you're on a bus and someone doesn't sit next to you, or
puts the bag down or something.
Things like that. Yeah. That usually is what used to get me. Has there have you actually seen anything like that?
Yeah, like, I mean, there's one, like, not too much, to be honest, or perhaps I'm too oblivious to these things. But, like, this one time, like, I caught the bus back home from school. And I was, like, obviously, like, I'd played soccer and stuff and shirt tucked out. I think I had a ball.
Yeah.
Must have looked quite unkept, possibly. But there was only, like, a few seats available on the bus. And then I was walking up and I think someone just like put the bag next to them.
Yep.
And I was only, like, probably 16, 17 years old, but like, that's probably like, I was like, oh wow, like, it's pretty mean. Like,
yeah. And
I didn't probably think about it from a racial sense. I just thought like that was a mean thing to do.
Yep.
And I wasn't happy about it, but whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. I think as well on the other side, so especially for us being Asian, and my wife gets it the worst, is people ask her to take photos for her. So, if people are taking photos, oh yeah, can you get a photo? And we always joke, it's like because they know the Asians will go hard and do the proper photo.
Okay.
So it's kind of like it's not a racism or a racial thing, but it's more just something funny that...
Like a stereotype.
A stereotype.
Yeah.
Like we'll be in the street as well, and then there'll be a group of, Chinese tourists, and then they'll ask myself for directions. Like, I can't speak Chinese, unfortunately. Different for you because you're actually a useful Indian. You can speak the language.
Like, and perhaps those people feel like comfortable with you, and they see you and like, oh, here's someone probably from our culture, and they probably want to,
So what's it like then when you go to like an Indian restaurant?
I speak a language called Tamil.
Okay. Is it quite a widely spoken dialect?
It's a big language in, like, there's an entire state in Tamil Nadu, in India, that speaks it. The state's called Tamil Nadu.
Yep.
And just out of, I know I'm getting a bit sidetracked, but just out of interest, like, Tamil is the oldest classical language that's still in use today.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
So Sanskrit is like the oldest language in the world. You might have heard of it.
Yep.
It's like an ancient Indian language. That's no longer in widespread use, but a derivative of that is Hindi, and that's being used.
Okay.
But Tamil is a classical language. It's very quite ancient, thousands of years old, and it's the oldest one that's still widely spoken all across the world. So India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia,
right. Okay.
Singapore, US, and things like that. Yeah, big. Yeah.
So it's pretty useful then. Like you said, it's fairly widely spoken.
Yeah, to some extent. There's certainly more people who speak Hindi, but there is a big Tamil diaspora everywhere you go.
Is there much of a crossover between the two, so Hindi and Tamil?
Completely different. That's the beautiful thing about India. India is like a bunch of different languages, cultures, religions put in one random massive place, and they all live together somehow. But if you went from one part of India to the other, they wouldn't understand you. Some of the cultural practices are different, and it's all different. North, south, east, west, everything's different.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So when you travel, say to the north, does that mean you can't communicate?
That's right, which I did recently. I was showing you photos.
Yeah, I saw some photos.
So when I went up north, I can speak like broken Hindi, like I can say a few words, ask for directions, ask for like food or whatever. But yeah, it's quite challenging when I go up there to visit, because like most of them do, but a lot of them don't speak English. So communicating is quite hard there.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you're way more useful than I. If I go to China, I can't even speak anything.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a good positive.
Mm.
For me, I remember growing up a lot of the times, and again, because I was from South Africa, I'd been speaking English my whole life. I would always get, your English is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I'd always say in my head, I'm like, what do you mean, for what? Like,
Yeah.
That's the only language I speak.
Do you speak Afrikaans as well?
I learned it up till when I left, which was in grade 3. And my parents speak it at home occasionally. So I can understand most of it. But I'm not a linguist at all. So I struggle to put, because, you know, sometimes the sentences structures change around. I always struggle with that. So I'm not the best, but I can understand.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so when people would say your English is pretty good, I'd always in my head now that I reflect on it, I used to get quite offended because I was always be like, "What do you mean for what? I've lived here my whole life. I've spoken English my whole life. Like, what are your thoughts around that?"
Interesting, because like obviously you expect someone who looks like me or to have a particular type of accent, and someone who looks like you to have a particular type of accent. That's just, unfortunately, like stereotypes. The stereotypes for a reason, right? Like they don't come out of the air. They come from certain sort of experiences or beliefs or something. So when they see someone like you or me speak in a particular kind of way, like it's more of like a pleasant surprise more than anything. I don't think a lot of people mean any harm by that. But sometimes, you know how things come out wrong.
Yes.
So like you might try to say, they might have meant it as a compliment to me or a compliment to you. Oh, wow, you speak good English. They actually mean that. They're like, they want you to feel happy. But then the way it comes out, it's just like, makes you feel like, oh. Like, yeah.
I know I'm to be honest, like I say I get offended by it, but I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I'll be with my wife and friends at a restaurant, and then, you know, a Japanese guy will come and his normal accent, I'm like, oh, his English is so good.
Yeah.
It's like, so I'm the one who's actually the perpetrator of it.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny.
And then it's similar for me. I get offended when I go to India and I speak Tamil, and people are like, wow, you speak such good Tamil. That actually upsets me. That upsets me because like I speak Tamil my whole life. I speak Tamil at home. I read and write. I'm like, you know, pretty into my language and culture and things like that. And then I go back home and then they're like, oh yeah, this guy's from Australia. He's lived there for 10, 12 years, whatever.
Yep.
And then sometimes they'll talk to me in English and then I'll reply back in Tamil. And then when I speak Tamil, they'll be like, oh my God, you speak Tamil.
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, I do. So like similar to what you said, but then my version of getting offended. Yeah.
Would if when you go to India, would the locals suspect that you're not a local? I mean, obviously, you know, you dress well and things like that. Would you actually stand out? Sometimes
you do. Like sometimes you can tell because like the way you do things is like different. Yeah.
Yep.
Like I don't even know how to cross the road properly. Like if it's really busy, like I need like someone to help.
Yeah.
It's like and then, you know, the way you order things or the way you like say bargain at like markets or clothing and things, like everything's going to be a bit different and people can generally sniff it out.
Yep.
I'd like to, when I go back, I'd like to just assimilate and just be as Indian as possible. I can try, but then sometimes people usually are able to tell that this guy's local.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
If ever I go
Usually
to Asia.
You do.
Let's jump forward then. So coming into the end of high school for you, when did you decide that you wanted to study medicine?
Honestly, I think it wasn't like a decision. I sort of didn't really want to do anything else. I didn't see myself doing anything else.
From what age was that sort of drive?
I think maybe pretty late. Like I wasn't one of those people from like, when I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. Because
had a stethoscope lying around.
No, that wasn't me because I don't come from a medical family. I wasn't surrounded by doctors. So that wasn't a thing for me. Maybe grade 9, 10, maybe even 11 was when I was like, oh, I need to study hard. And then this because I really want to do this. I didn't see myself doing, say, engineering and doing math. I didn't see myself doing like business. Like that was just what I visualized myself in.
And what was it at that age that sort of drew you in?
I think it was maybe like just being around people. I think you and I are both quite social people. We like talking to people, learning about them, and I liked having like a big circle and things like that. So that natural sort of trait in me sort of drew me to a profession that it's surrounded by people, and also you're able to sort of care for them and perhaps help them and maybe enhance their life for the better.
Yep.
So those were the things that drew me to it.
Yeah, so what's the pathway then? So now in your mind you're thinking this is something I think I have an aptitude for. I want to gear myself towards that. What were the next steps from there? So brush up on the grades. How does it go from there?
So like once you have a bit of direction, it, like you said, it allows you to work harder. And I did work hard in high school, but sometimes like the effort and work that I was putting in was not always translating to the results I was getting.
Yep.
I was a very focused person. I especially during the last couple of years, I really put my head down. I reduced like my activities outside of school, and then I put my head down and studied. But sometimes there was a bit of mismatch between the effort I was putting in and the result I was getting.
Yep.
So I would often get a bit disheartened at times, year 11, year 12, like that. But yeah, I knew that I needed to work really hard to get to medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. So straight out of school then, how did it all pan out?
Yeah, so straight out of school, I didn't actually get into medicine right after year 12. I actually spent a couple of years doing some other things at QUT.
Yep.
So I started off doing like radiation therapy with the view of, so I was wanting to do like a medical related, healthcare related field with the view of bumping up the grades to get into a career in medicine. That was my plan all along.
Yep.
So I spent a couple of years at QUT trying to get my grades up, trying to get my volunteering experiences up, and creating a good CV for me to then be able to apply to medicine.
Yep.
And I was very fortunate in the sense that I didn't complete any degrees. Like I sort of was able to move after a couple of years.
Yeah, because I'm not across the whole process, but you usually have to, if you don't get in straight out of school, you usually have to do a bachelor's, right?
That's correct, yeah. So the most straightforward pathways to getting into medicine are, one, you do your proper work at school and you get into med right after, or you complete an undergraduate degree and do like a postgrad, like an examination called GAMSAT, which is like a massive exam, and then through that you get admittance to a postgraduate course, which might be 4 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's these weird people like me in the middle who didn't get in after school, neither did we complete a degree, but somehow managed to find a way in the middle.
If you don't mind, how did you get in?
Which is very fortunate. So like they look at your GPA, of course, like during university. And then my university, I went up to James Cook University in Townsville. So GPA, written application, which looks into volunteering and things like that, and your interest in medicine. And then, of course, the interview process as well.
Yep.
And there's a small number of spots available for people like me, and fortunately I was very lucky to be able to.
Must have given an amazing interview. So.
I hope so, yeah.
Well done,
so.
man.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we don't have to talk too much about your time at JCU, but how was the experience? It's very different from different people. Some guys, I don't say breeze through it, but it's less stressful than others. How did you find? Is it 6 years? 6
years. So, like I said, it was 2 years of uncertainty to try and get in.
Yeah.
So when I got in, like it was just, I don't think I've ever been happier. Like,
oh man, I can't imagine.
Yeah. So it meant a lot to me when I got in. So I think that sort of just translated into like, oh my God, I'm here. I need to do really, really well. So I just like worked super, super hard throughout, like way harder than I'd even worked before.
Yep.
So I moved up to Townsville away from my family. And I was there by myself essentially, and then all I did was study because I just wanted to do really well and make the most out of the opportunity that was given to me. And I had a great time. I made some amazing friends, like friends who are still with me to this day. We did lots of traveling, worked together, we studied together, like we got through exams together, and then they're the friends that are now still with me at this stage in my life as well.
Yeah. Oh, perfect, man. And I suppose, would you have any advice to someone in your position so they didn't get in straight out of school? You obviously worked your ass off to get into that position and to get in. Is there any advice you give to someone?
I wouldn't call this advice, but like I just want to say, like, anything you want to do, like if you work hard enough, you will get it.
Yep.
Guaranteed. It's just a matter of time. So the only difference between someone who gets what they want and doesn't is how long they put in the effort is pretty much it. Because it's only a matter of time. Like that's what I firmly believe. So if someone is willing to put in the time and stick it out, they can get into whatever they want to get in, whether it be medicine or, I don't know, sport or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a cricket fan at all?
Unfortunately not. I watch cricket when India plays, but I'm really bad at cricket. And as you know, like we play soccer together. Like I grew up playing soccer.
I was going to say, because the analogy, it's a stupid analogy, but it's very similar to cricket, right? If you keep bowling the ball in the same spot, you're going to get the results.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is, if you just keep working hard, it'll come.
Exactly, yeah. So you just have to not lose hope along the way, because it gets hard sometimes. And it never gets easy. Like you do medicine, you get through med school, and then you finish. Now you're a junior doctor. Now you have to decide what specialty you want to do, and then it's hard. So it never stops. You shouldn't lose hope or heart along the way.
And now that you completed it, and you've been working in it for a little while, is it everything that you thought it was going to be? I mean, early days, but...
Early days. I've only been working for just over a year now.
Yeah.
So it took me a little while to settle in. Just getting used to the long working hours and not being able to do all the fun stuff that I used to do outside of work. And then it definitely is what I thought it would be. And then now that I'm a bit more settled in my role, like after a year or so, I'm starting to sort of enjoy it a bit more. Like I'm able to sit back a bit more and just let things fall into place a bit more easily.
Yep.
Before I'm just trying to adapt and everything, which made it a bit harder. But now it's a bit more seamless, I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's only going to get hopefully easier with more experience.
Hopefully, yeah. It's just time and experience.
We spoke about it briefly off camera. So job satisfaction. Like I said to you, a lot of the doctors that I know, medicine is their life. In their spare time, they're reading about it. They really want to make a difference. It's not just a job that gives good money. What does being a doctor do for you?
Yeah, so as you said, medicine, it's long hours, lots of study, and you really have to invest a significant portion of your young years into it. And because of that, a lot of other things take a hit, right? Like perhaps your family life, friends, travel, etc., things like that. So in order to be able to do it, like you said, you have to be really, really passionate about it. And in order to be able to go to work every day and work at a good intensity, something needs to keep you going, right?
And it's not just the paycheck.
Exactly, right.
It's something else.
Trust me, if it's for the paycheck, like there's lots and lots of ways to make good money, respectable money, without having to go through all this, mental turmoil and study and things like that. So this is one thing I would say. If it's for the money, trust me, don't do it. You have to do it. Of course, financial things are a bonus as well. Like if you work hard, there are incentives. Naturally, if you work hard in anything, you will do well, right? So money is a bonus on the side. But if that is the primary motivator, there'll come a point where you'll just be like, no, too much. Yeah. So you need to find something that ticks, makes you go. And for a lot of people, it's different things. For me, like I told you off camera, like it's those little comments from a patient or like a colleague or a doctor or a nurse just telling you that, you're helping me, or you're doing a good job, or like a patient being happy with the care they received and things like that. little moments like that at the end of a long day is what sort of gets me through that day, and then it gives me a smile to turn up to work the next day as well. So that's.
So any patients out there, if you know, you'd be surprised, or I guess anyone out there, just a little bit of support, a little bit of encouragement goes a long way for anyone.
Exactly.
Whether
right.
you're an athlete, a doctor,
any field, yeah.
You know, it all makes a difference.
Knowing that what you're doing is having some sort of an impact, because you know you're a junior doctor and like you have lots of doubts about yourself and things like that, right? So like a little bit of affirmation, a little bit of like a pat on the back, it just gives you the motivation to keep going and makes you feel like, oh, cool, maybe I can keep doing this. Maybe I can become somebody. Like, you need to have that confidence and motivation.
Changing it up a little bit. You got a great sense of style. You enjoy travel, the finer things in life, a bit of watches and things like that. Where did that all come from? Is that friends, family? Where's that influence come from?
Maybe like both of us play soccer. Like a lot of the football stars we see, a lot of what we do is like influenced. What I do is like sometimes the way I dress, it's like influenced by the people I like, right?
Yep.
It's like, I don't know, like I'm a huge, Cristiano fan, Messi fan.
Me too. I'm Ronaldo's the GOAT for me.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys.
I used to always like Messi more, but lately I appreciate Ronaldo a lot more, especially in the later parts of the careers and things like that.
Yep.
So like, I don't know, you see things, you like a couple of actors, you like a few like soccer players, and then you want to dress like them. And I don't know, personally for me, dressing well is just a matter of like, I think it's an important thing to do for anyone.
Yep.
Because it shows that you are serious, it shows that you care about how you look and how you're put together, and it's not just for yourself. Like it makes you feel good, but also like it makes people a bit more confident about you and a bit more comfortable with you and things like that.
Yep.
Not to the point where you completely blow them out of the water and make them feel less about themselves. Not like that, but just more of like you're well kept, and whatever you do, you'll do it properly.
And I can't agree with you anymore on all those things you just said, because I'm exactly the same. So especially with me in a sort of relationship sort of consultant role.
Exactly right.
Not to say, you need to wear the flashy suit and tie, because anyone can do that. But
exactly right, yeah.
Make sure your shoes are clean. One thing that I look at for a guy, and it's extremely judgmental of me, is the first thing I look at is their shoes. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, Louis Vuitton loafers or anything like that. It's more, are they clean? Are they tatted up? Or ratty? Just because that tells a lot about someone. Did they take that little bit of effort to make sure that something like a shoe is presentable?
Yeah. Because it tells you about how much effort they'd put into other parts of their life. It's like a bit of a window into what they're like as a person.
So I've had this argument with so many friends where they're like, no, it's stupid. But it's something that I look at.
And some people are like, oh, why should it matter what I wear? Like everyone should treat everyone. Well, it's true. Like you should treat everyone with respect regardless of what they're wearing. But it's not about what you're wearing. It's not about the brand. It's not about how expensive. It's not about that at all. Like most of my shirts, like not over $20, not over $30. It's just about putting together something that looks good and looks presentable.
Yeah, you've taken the extra 5 minutes to think about how you want to be perceived.
Yeah.
I think it's massive.
Yeah.
Cultural differences. So let's talk about now. So I remember when I was younger, things like not wanting to take rice to school. In the Chinese culture, there's this medicated like sort of peppermint oil, which my mum, my grandmother would put on absolutely anything. It's like a magic oil, and the smell was very strong. So things like that, I was always quite sensitive about. We spoke about it before, not wanting to stand out. In your teen years, you just kind of want to blend in. Is there anything that you see now, or you realize now that you're like, oh, maybe I should tone it back? Or I guess you say you hang out with mostly sort of Eastern Asians anyway. Yeah,
I did back in school. Now I have a lot more diverse friend group, like growing up and things like that. But you're right, because when in those years, like you already look different to everyone else and you're already trying to not stand out. So if you bring lunch and, it's like Indian curry and rice or, Thai green curry or Asian food or things
Yeah.
like that, you know, there might be a bit of a smell associated with it, and you're opening your lunchbox and eating, and everyone's looking at you, and it just draws attention and things like that. So you're right. So that's I had a similar. I used to prefer to just get food from the tuck shop rather than pack food, because it, you know, just to avoid a bit of
Yep.
attention and things like that. So I agree with that. But I think I would say now I'm a lot more comfortable to embrace my culture and my background. I bring my food into work, put it in the fridge in the hospital. I take it out, heat it up, eat it. Like, I'm completely fine with it.
Yep.
I think it's just if you're able to stick it out through those formative years of your life when you're trying to figure out who you are and things like that, if you're able to sort of stick to your roots a little bit and, you know, sort of give into what your parents are saying as well and understand where they're coming from. And if you just stick through it, eventually you'll come out okay, and you'll find a balance of embracing your culture and blending in with the surrounding culture. But you just have to stick through it. Otherwise, if you'll get very confused about who you are and,
Yep.
and things like that.
And then the last one before we move on, looking back at everything. So born in India, going to Singapore, Australia here. Obviously, it's shaped the way you are.
Yeah, that's definitely very lucky to be different places. Yeah.
Do you think it's been an advantage to be able to draw on so many different places and experiences?
Definitely, yeah. So naturally, the more different places you live in, like I've only lived in 2 or 3 places. Some have lived in way more.
Yep.
But naturally, the more places you live in, you meet more people, and you learn how to respect people and respect their cultures and learn about their cultures and things like that. So sure, for people like you and me, like for example, if we meet someone, regardless of where they come from, we'll be able to build some sort of rapport just because of our previous experiences and things like that. So it's definitely a great strength. For example, in your job, when you meet lots of clients and things like that, and in my job, when I'm seeing patients in these days, very, very multicultural backgrounds.
Yep.
Being able to form a bit of a connection is always good, right? So when I see like a Caucasian patient, I'm able to build a connection. I can tell them about my interest, or I can tell them that I lived in Townsville and things like that. It builds a bit of rapport. When I see an Indian patient, naturally they feel a bit more comfortable with me, and they feel happy to see someone from their culture and things like that. When I see someone from your background, I often tell them that I don't do this to purpose. It's not the first thing I say. Oh, by the way, I love Chinese food. No, it's not like that.
Yep.
It's like, you know, it comes up in conversation. It's like, oh, by the way,
It's an important part of the life,
I
right?
grew up in Singapore, and then they're like, oh wow, that's really interesting. Like, so you do have to find a way to connect to people, because if you don't connect to people, you won't be able to build a relationship as a, you know, in business or in medicine. Like, they won't open up to you, and it's not good for their care, because they need to be able to tell you their issues so that you can help alleviate the issues, right?
Yeah.
So living in different places allowed me to meet people from different cultures, and now I use those skills to be able to form connections with people that helps me on an everyday basis, I would say.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's exactly how I thought it would
Similar
be.
for you
Very
as
similar to
well.
me. And being a bit of a chameleon, being able to be that chameleon where
Yeah.
you know you are Indian.
Yeah,
You grew up in an Asian country
Definitely.
in Singapore. You live here now. You went to university in rural Queensland. So you have all those little different
Experiences,
strings to your bows.
But
and then,
all of that, you don't lose sight of who you are
course.
as a person. You shouldn't. Yeah.
And then is that why you enjoy travel now? To be able to draw different things, or do you just enjoy the idea of going to meet, seeing new things?
It's more probably the second thing. Like, I just absolutely enjoy like natural beauty, like mountains or oceans and things like that. It's sort of, when I go there, you know, like, it just takes everything off my shoulders. Like, I can just relax completely. Like, even after a long day at work, I often, you know, drive out to, you know, Redland or Cleveland to go to the the beach there and things like that, because it just lets me unwind. So I have a strong passion to travel to new places, beautiful places, and then of course meet new people there, learn a little bit about them, try new foods, and every now and then stay in like nice places to experience that area and things like that. So I really enjoy that. Yeah.
And where, just really quickly, where's the best place you've ever been to? Where's your favorite place?
I haven't actually traveled that much. Like I've only ever been to lots of Asian countries growing up around here. Um, I've been to. I really enjoy. It's funny because I really enjoy traveling back to Singapore,
Okay.
which I recently did.
Yeah.
I grew up there, but I enjoyed traveling back there.
It's different now when you
Yeah,
go
it's
back,
different
right?
now,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed recently going back. And then I absolutely love traveling through India as well because India is like multiple different countries in one. Like there's so many different landscapes. If you go up north, there's like snowy mountains, the Himalayas.
Yes.
It looks like Switzerland. There's like mountains down south. There's like backwaters and tropical sort of areas as well. Like it's very different. So you can do lots of traveling in India, and I recently traveled up to the north, and I absolutely enjoyed it so much. So I want to continue to explore India because there's so many different parts, but then of course go to like I haven't been to Europe, I haven't been to the States, so I want to be able to do that as well.
On a lot of people who've been to India, it's a bit of a lame answer, but they say the Taj Mahal is just an absolute magical place, which I really want to get to one
You
day.
should, yeah. It really is. And I don't want to speak much about it because I want you to experience it for yourself because you can't describe how you feel when you see it. It's just stunning.
Yeah. Cool, man. Let's get on to these short answer questions. So don't think too much about them, sort of whatever comes straight to mind.
Quick.
So let's go. Who's your biggest role model?
I would say like my family collectively.
Yep.
Because they work so hard. They worked hard to give me a good life, and I feel like I need to work hard to continue to move in the right direction and trajectory.
Yep, perfect. On that then, what does a meaningful life look like to you?
A meaningful life is a life with good friends, good family, doing something to impact positively on someone's life in your profession or whatever else that you might do, and just gaining as much experience as possible in travel or like just learning about the world is good, and looking after your family and having good, like you said you wanted to have children early, so like bringing children into the world and teaching them a thing or two about what you know and helping set them up for a good life is also what I think is a good life. Other people might argue otherwise, but that's just what I think. Yeah.
No, perfect. Yeah, it's exactly what does it look like to you. What's your biggest achievement?
My biggest achievement, I would say at this stage, is probably like, after spending those 2 years and then getting into medicine. Naturally, doing well after that came easy because I really wanted to do well. But then getting in was probably
I love that, man. Like where you say, that's once you were in, that was the relief because from here, you've already done the work.
Yeah.
And you knew that you were ready for it.
Exactly. And you can't take that away from someone, right?
What's your dream job?
A dream job? I think I told you that I'm still in the process of deciding like what specialty I want to do. I'm thinking like along the critical care line, like anesthetics type thing. But for now, we'll just keep it very generic and say my dream job would be a job in medicine where I'm able to not only benefit patients to the best of my abilities, but also have a good life, like work-life balance, and spend time with my friends and family and still travel and do the things that I like. So my dream job is a balanced job.
Is it a silly assumption to say your dream job outside of medicine would be to be a soccer player?
100%. Or like I love like music.
Okay.
I like movies. So
singer, actor, something
maybe,
like that.
Yeah, I would have loved to be in like the media or something like that, or sport, which is also why like I really wanted to do this podcast with you because this is a great opportunity to share things with you and be on screen and things like that.
Yeah, no, man, you've done a great job so far. How would others describe you?
Cheeky, hardworking maybe, and I'd like to think I'm someone you can call on or count on.
So a dependable man.
If you need me, yeah.
If someone stole food to feed their starving family, would you consider them a bad person?
I know it's a very moral question.
It's your answer. Yep.
Yeah, it's a very moral question, but I just wish they didn't have to be in a position to steal food to feed their starving family. It's a hard question. Sorry, I said no straight off the bat, but then
I'd probably lean towards your answer of no, because again, we don't know the whole circumstances of it, but desperate times sometimes call for desperate measures, especially for family.
I don't know if they stole a loaf of bread or something. As long as the stealing didn't involve a violent crime, or like ended up in someone getting hurt, they, I don't know, like ate a meal and jetted without paying for it for their young kid or something. If I owned a business, I'll let it slide, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, that's good. You sort of spoke about it before, but what do you like to do to relax?
Playing soccer with you guys is like probably one of my biggest relaxations.
Yep.
That's like once a week we do that. Going to the beach, I like to do that. And then spending time with my dog, like, who's only entered my life 2 years ago, but has completely changed my life around. Like, it's so lovely, like, to have like a pet, and then you care for them, and it gives you a bit of routine in your life. So,
and then the last one, describe your perfect day. So firstly, who's it with? And we don't have to go into every detail, but take us through your morning, your afternoon, and your evening. So what sort of things would you do?
Perfect day.
Your perfect day.
So the days I feel most accomplished is when I wake up early. I do like a physical form of activity, whether it be gym or soccer. It doesn't have to be both, one or the other. Hopefully get a bit of meditation in as well if I can. And then let's say you have work, so you perform well at work, you meet your expectations at work and others' expectations as well. And then come back from work and then perhaps do like a social thing, either with a friend or like with your family, like go out to dinner or something, and just have a good. That's a general perfect day. But then if you ask me for a perfect day on my holidays, that's going to be different.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So just, your standard perfect day. I love that answer. It's around family. It's about doing well in your job and serving other people. So I don't think you can ask for too much more.
It's hard. It doesn't happen very, like, it's not often I get to fit all of that in. Like, this is my ideal.
Yeah.
When it happens, it feels great.
Cool, man. And then the very last thing is, what's next for you? So you spoke about you're going to have to start worrying, or not worrying, but thinking about you specializing. Is there anything else that is on the horizon for you? Is there anything you're working on at the moment?
Not particularly, Ethan. I'm one of those people that it's definitely good to have a bit of a long-term goal and approach and things like that. I do have that to some extent, but I'm also someone who sort of lives on like a day-to-day basis. It sort of just helps me stay like calm, and it helps me focus on the situation at hand.
Yep.
So I'm not thinking too far ahead into the future. I'm just sort of taking each day as it comes. But that's not to say I am cognizant that I have to work to, like, for example, if you're working towards a particular specialty, you do have to work to, you can't just like randomly end up there, right? You do have to have a long-term goal. So I am cognizant of that. I'm just trying to work hard every single day, and hopefully I will find a way to figure things out and go in the right direction. But I don't have any particular things coming up on the horizon. No.
Is there anything outside of work that is coming up? Trying to run a marathon or something like that?
Not particularly, but I have some holidays coming up in, I think, July, August.
Oh, nice.
I'm planning a trip to Europe with a friend of mine who I went to med school with.
Oh, nice.
So that's something I want to do.
Cool, man. Well, as I said at the start, Raga is a man of style, an athlete, everything that goes with it. But like I said, firstly, he's just a great guy. So
thank you so much.
I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. I really enjoyed this, and you're a great person. And to be able to come here to your home and see your family, I can see you're doing a lot of things right, and you're doing your hobbies and your passions. And I'm really inspired by you, and I'll take a lot of good things with me when I leave from here. So thank you for your time.
Thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Bye.